B2B marketing is getting harder and harder than ever, with cost per acquisitions rising across the board. But just throwing more money at the problem isn't the answer. In this video, I caught up with Kelly Peters, who is the VP of Marketing at Tomorrow.io, a company working with the likes of Uber, Ford, Fox, and even the US Air Force. And we unpack and dive into how Tomorrow consistently punch above their weight with only a very small marketing team to really stand out and cut through the noise amongst the competition. From making 30-minute documentaries that completely go against all traditional marketing advice, to even hacking their outbound sales strategy using proprietary data. This is an absolute masterclass in bold, effective B2B marketing. And regardless of what industry you're in or what stage of the journey you're at, you are absolutely not going to want to miss this one. This will challenge the way you currently think about marketing. Let's get straight into it. So Kelly, it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about the business, just so we've got some context to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here talking to you. So at Tomorrow.io, we are a resilience technology. And what that means is that we help businesses all over the world across all industries. Some examples being like US Air Force, Uber, Ford, all of the big names that you've heard of, adapt to weather, meaning both prepare for it and mitigate risk, but also take advantage of it for opportunities. So I mentioned some names. We work with the Fortune 10, 60% of the Fortune 10s right now. And the way that we achieve that is by basically differentiating on 3 key pillars. And I mentioned this not to really dive too much into the nitty gritty of our value prop. I am confident I could sell everyone listening right now, but because it's really interesting technology. So just to explain briefly, so it starts first at the data side, and we actually have our own space constellation. So we're getting proprietary observations right now, literally in space. Then we have our own, it's so cool. We have our own modeling as well, a lot of AI and machine learning in there. And then finally, we have a software platform, and kind of our secret sauce is that we tell you not just what to do, or pardon me, not just what the forecast is, but what to do about it. And as you can imagine, that's far more helpful for mitigating risk and taking advantage of those opportunities for your operations versus just like a broad forecast. It's a really cool company.
Yeah. Cool. So we were just talking before we went live with this. I was just saying to Kelly, one of the things I've always been super impressed with by you guys is just your willingness to take risks in marketing. So one of the things that, if you go on Tomorrow's website, you'll probably see this, but you guys, when was it now? About a couple of years ago now, you released a movie of going into space, right? Your kind of expedition into space.
We did. And actually, we just came out with another one. So continue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we did. Wow, I'll tell you about it. Yeah.
Here's my question for you, because people watching this right now are probably thinking how the hell do you get sign off on that, Kelly? How does that even happen? Yeah. Because it's kind of the question on everyone's mind normally when I think we're thinking through marketing decisions. It's where's the ROI on that, right? How do I prove the ROI on it? So I'd love to know a bit about the kind of, because one thing I've noticed with some of the most successful companies out there is they have a very different ethos and belief. It's not just the marketing strategy. Mm-hmm. It's what is your fundamental belief and ethos around how we market, how we actually go to market. And this is one of the things I think you guys are doing differently. And this is a perfect example. So how do you, before you tell us about the actual movie itself, which is awesome, how do you actually think through those kind of decisions?
Yeah, totally. I would say if I had to sum it up, I like what you said about it stemming from this more core fundamental ethos. And for us, I would say that's kind of this rejection of any middle ground. And I'll explain what I mean. First off, the mission I just described is massive and the tech behind it is really deep and complex, but we actually are a really lean team. So on the marketing side, we have 4 full-time employees right now. And so we really don't have an option or the budget or the people to do everything under the sun and just use the traditional marketing playbook and check it all off and that's it. We just can't compete. And so it really is ingrained in us that we've made that almost our virtue and our superpower to reject the middle ground and either go big or go home. And I think that's where what you're picking up on, like this risk, the kind of this risky side comes from. And so on the content side, we've taken that in before we start any project, said, would you, Tom, not just as a B2B buyer, want to watch this, but would you as an individual want to consume this piece of content? And if the answer is no, then like we don't do it. It's not worth it. We can't compete. It's saturated. We'd be making pointless ebooks, like one of them, like a quarter, and like that's it. Yeah, we really decided like we need to radically stand out and take the big swings, or there's no point for us in doing it. And so that's the ethos behind it. And I also should mention, I think we're very fortunate in that we have a ton of top-down trust. Like that's all well and good to have this vision as I just described about your marketing fundamental beliefs. But if, your leadership isn't bought in, on paper, like this sounds like a terrible idea. Like we're a tiny team, we're going to go make a 30-minute documentary, sounds good. And so we have a lot of top-down trust, and that's built for many years of, relationship with our CEO, and he's just an awesome person. And, we've proven ourselves, obviously, but I can't, I'd be remiss to not mention that also. So a lot of relationship building just internally too, and externally. So I think of equal importance is having a third party who you really trust. I think we've done a good job of understanding our core competencies internally and knowing where we need to outsource. And so for the documentary, for example, first person we went to was actually not on our payroll. It's our videographer. His name's Travis Wilbur. He's fantastic. He basically functions as an extension of our team and really knows our brand and really cares to dig in with us and ideate. And so to back up, so that's kind of the answer to the first part of your question, but to tell you what the documentary is with all of that in mind, we launched our first space satellites, and we decided we need to do a big campaign, obviously. This is the biggest thing that's happened in company history. We could do your typical checklist marketing, paid campaigns, email blast, all of that, but it just felt like such a big fundamental milestone for us that we needed to tell a bigger story. So we went to Travis and immediately started talking, what can we do with video? Naturally, this is such a visual experience, seeing a rocket go up and then seeing the satellites. And as we talked, it was this is more than just a typical 3-minute promo teaser. I think this is a full documentary. So first space launch we put out, it's called 6 Years to Launch. You can find it on our website. It's about a 30-minute documentary that outlines the company growth all the way from our founders up through the first space launch. And then more recently, we just did a sequel in January of this year that goes from that point following that first space launch until modern day. And it's really more of a story about the data and the impact of the satellites on people on the ground. So yeah, please check them out on our website. But I could keep going and talk about them all day. But
was that planned? Yeah. Was the sequel? Was that always part of it?
Yes, if you had asked me in a meeting, yes, definitely. It was always part of it. Now, what I was really thinking was, oh my gosh, can we do this again? But yeah, it always was the hope and the plan. But once we did the first one, I felt more confident, we're scrappy, and it worked. Once we were able to show the results of the first, which by the way, it's been seen in, I just checked this before we got on, in 82 countries, which is amazing. Wow. And we saw, to your question on the ROI side, yeah, it's so difficult to measure this super top of funnel piece of content. I mean, if you can even consider it a piece of the traditional marketing funnel, it's more this piece of media, and that's kind of what we wanted. It's so difficult to measure. We can look at views, you can look at click-throughs, getting there, the traditional metrics, but what we saw more than anything was it being brought up by media, in PR conversations, it getting brought up at events, on sales calls, us mentioning it and people saying, send it to me, I'm going to watch it with my kids. And that is what we were able to highlight and show the value of. And those conversations, ultimately, if we looked at the numbers, accelerated faster than other ones who didn't. And so it's a lot of trust, but yeah, that's the high level there.
I think that's so powerful, because I think so much of the most effective marketing is so often intangible. It's not, you can't really put a finger on how it works or where in the funnel does it belong. Like it is just one of those things where, like, you know, there are so many, like you say, even just like, you know, the press and the media that you guys get from that, and even from a, you know, I'm sure that there are even just internally for the team, it's such a kind of inspiring thing for the team to get behind as well, right? So there's all of these other kind of downstream effects that this piece of content ultimately then has on just the business overall.
Definitely. And think as well, yeah, to your point about the team getting excited, like what we found is when we put them as the stars of these pieces, you know, like the space team, for example, of course
share it,
the team wants to share it. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so it's just this natural momentum and this snowball effect. It's exactly as you said. Yeah.
That's so cool. And what have you, because I think something, you know, you mentioned there as well earlier that was really important is, you know, obviously you need that kind of top down trust as well, right? From, you know, the buy-in from leadership on these things.
Yeah, totally.
What have you found kind of, because I guess there's always going to be a balance. There's always going to be some degree of give and take in any of these things, right? It's like, okay, we can't necessarily attribute everything, but then we need to be able to attribute some things or show some growth in ROI. Like how do you kind of strike that balance at the moment? You know, when you're making these decisions, how do you strike the balance between, okay, this is a big swing, this is just a risk we're willing to take here because it's something we believe in, versus then doing the things that are also kind of more tangible and trackable? Like, how do you have a kind of framework for thinking through those decisions?
Yeah, I like this question. So first off, I should say we just talked about something that did get greenlit, and we did, and it's amazing, this whole like documentary. But there are a million ideas on our team that are like on the cutting room floor. An example, just because it's fun, is we recently said like the satellites themselves are such a core part of our mission and technology. We should be able to brand them. Like, let's go to the satellites and like, let's make the metal like different colors. They of course said like, love the idea. Literally that would go up into space and like restrict our functionality of getting observations, like hang tight. Don't think we can do that. And like, that's just one recent idea. And so we're getting told no a lot, but continuing to go to bat with other ideas. And so I think I wish I could give you an exact framework, but like just from an interpersonal perspective, it's a lot of just like listening and trying to see the other person's perspective. And also, yes, we cannot attribute like the perfect model that you'd want for like a 50-person marketing organization, but we still do at the end of the day always surface even anecdotal references back, like basically, you know, like experiential attribution, I guess is what I'm saying, is like really key to keep building that trust. So like whenever we hear about the documentary, for example, being mentioned on a sales call, our reps are really collaborative with us and say, that's so awesome, that's our marketing team. I'm gonna make sure I funnel that back to them. Let's send over like a piece of swag for you to, you know, have when you watch it or something like that. And we're able to like really take those moments and spotlight that in leadership meetings even. And I think then after that deal, for example, accelerates faster, which we can measure, that's connected from the beginning because we've told that story of that one moment in time. And so, I guess it's a lot of like, as I call it, experiential attribution, and being diligent about that though, and like really making sure the right people know when those moments happen, because they are, and then tracking following that moment.
It's such a good point, and it actually, it's so surprising how often that doesn't happen. Like there's a client we worked with last year where it was only after we had a call with their sales team, and and they said like, oh yeah, we've actually had quite a few people recently saying that they've seen this video on LinkedIn of XYZ, which was one of the ad campaigns. But they didn't mention that to the marketing team at all.
Yeah, right.
There was just no communication there. It was just like they were having those conversations, but they weren't feeding it back. Yeah. So then, you know, for you guys, for us in marketing, it's kind of like, is this working?
Totally.
we have no idea. So like, it's so important that there's that kind of clear channel of communication.
Yeah. And vice versa, I'll say I've been on small marketing teams in the past. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've spent a lot of time on attribution models, as I'm sure you have and everyone listening. And if you're a small team, like they're innately very, very difficult to do and take a lot of time. And I've built things out that then in the end technically are right. But if you went back to that person and say, these touch points, we know that you saw, like, what did you think of them? Probably they didn't stick with them. And as much as like a whole documentary, most likely, or like maybe the attribution was wrong. And so we're very unique. I'm not saying this is for everyone, but like we'd rather invest our time on the big creative swings and do that, surface up the experiential attribution than like building out an amazing W model or whatever it is.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's crazy. You can get so just caught up in the weeds of attribution modeling. It's just, it's just insane. And I suppose it's like you say, right? Every business is different. It's going to depend on like, what's your customer value firstly, but there's so many factors that come into it. So, but yeah, it's a good point. And I think it is important sometimes for any business though, just to kind of step back from the weeds and just kind of look at the bigger picture in terms of like, because very often I know we've talked about this before, but it's kind of like marketing is very rarely like, or attribution in general, it's not a linear journey. There might be 50 touch points, there might be 2 touch points. Like you just don't know. It's going to look different for everyone. So it's kind of more of like, how can we get like different parts in place and just look at our marketing holistically versus obsessing over any one particular area,
Exactly. And each touch point, like, the path is important, journey, of course, but like if it's subpar, mediocre content at each touch point, like, do we even care about how many touch points,
And actually that reminds me, one of the things you said earlier that I did want to come back to is just, you mentioned about the, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said something about like when you were thinking through like the documentary itself is like, would somebody actually want to watch this?
Yeah.
I think it's such a like an overlooked question, but such an important question for any marketing, like any kind of marketing you're doing. It's kind of like, would I actually want to stop in my busy day? Because I think sometimes we kind of forget, like we're all busy and we kind of just assume that, our customers aren't busy. They'll take the time to look at this ad that I've just put together. It's like, what?
Right, totally. Yeah, they're pausing in their day, like not their B2B buyer journey, like their day.
Is that how do you how do you guys think through that? Is that a question you're kind of always asking internally, like when you're putting out? Do you have any kind of checks in place for that, where you're kind of like almost like auditing your things before you put them out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say we do, but it's not even like some official documented thing, but we're really good about getting cross-functional gut checks. Like we have an amazing relationship with sales and go-to-market generally. And like we have go-to people who will just send something to and say, like, what do you think of this? Like, is it too boring and jargony? And we trust them, they trust us, and they'll say like, this is, I stop listening like 30 seconds in.
I love that.
I think also the team trust top down, not just from our CEO, but Dan Slagan, our CMO, is really important. Like he really challenges us to say like, you're wasting your time. Like he's very direct in the best way creatively. Like, no, we don't have the time to do that. I keep going back to ebooks. No diss to ebooks if they're working for you, by the way, but like this traditional thing, like think bigger, and he really pushes us. So a lot of relationship stuff, but we have a lot of cross-functional partners who gut check us.
Love it. Yeah, I think it's so important, right? Even just having like a, literally like a sounding board Slack channel where you can just get like raw feedback on those ideas.
Yeah, totally.
It's so important.
The documentary is one example, I think, on the content side of kind of like actively rejecting this middle ground marketing. But another place that we've seen this work really well recently is in the events space. So we've all gone to events where maybe you sponsor and your logo is one among like a sea of logos, and then you send your rep and say, good luck, here's a bunch of one pagers, like please go find the right people. And to us, like we don't see the ROI with those huge events that I just described. And so a few ways that I think are interesting that we've recently kind of unlocked being able to really go all the way or not for events. First off is doing big creative activations. So for example, we did go to a broad event recently, and it was an important one just from a brand perspective even to be there. It's one in the weather space that you need to be at. And so we were there with a booth. It looked great, but it just felt like there was a risk of blending in too much. And so we had a satellite model built to scale of our real satellite, and we hung it above our booth. And it really served as, it was awesome. I'll send you pictures after, John. But it kind of like anchored our brand. And so when you walked into the hall, it was like the first thing you saw visually. And so that was one example. And then also speaking back to the idea of, would you as a person want to consume or participate in this thing versus a buyer? We've started hosting really tight-knit, like almost closed-door sessions that we've really shifted from having a sales environment to more of just a thought leadership forum. And so we did this recently in our Boston office, and it was for the aviation industry. We invited 10 major aviation carriers, pretty senior folks, and we did not talk about our product once. We were in our office, obviously, we were the hosts, but we just brought people together to talk about top of mind things in the industry. Weather was part of it, obviously, and there's a lot that goes into aviation on the weather side, so that was a good point of conversation. But more than that, it was just connecting these people. And I'll tell you that naturally at the end, when we went for Q&A after 2 days, like almost everyone said, by the way, why have we not heard about your product? We would love to schedule follow-up time. And it was just awesome to see this come to fruition. We were really intentional about not being promotional and just bringing together the right people for interesting conversation. And we've converted a number of the leads and like our continuing conversation. So we'll continue to do those, but I just think that's an interesting format that others could explore.
100%. I love that you've said that. I think that is such a powerful, it's kind of like, because this is a thing, and this is kind of even similar to like what we're doing right now, right? This is kind of what I realize is that people don't want to listen to agencies talking about marketing. Every agency is trying to sell them something, but they do want to listen to other B2B marketing leaders like yourself, right? They want to hear what other B2B marketers are doing. Right. So if we can just be a kind of host for that, to share that space, to get other people listening, that then opens doors for us. And I think what you mentioned there, like it's such a powerful thing, but it's just such a kind of fundamental part of just human psychology, right? Like people do not like to be sold to.
Right.
But we do want to come to our own decisions. So what you've done there is you've kind of created this space where people can learn from their peers. They can almost have like a kind of networking session, right? But then they can be like, this looks interesting. Like, well, you're giving them the opportunity to actually sell themselves on your product and your service without you guys even having to do anything. So I think that's a really, really smart move. And I want to come back to what you said about the events thing as well, because like you said, it just exactly highlights that kind of thinking through how can we make this something people would want to engage with. And I've always felt that about events. It's so crazy the amount of people that, create these like booths, they, buy out this space, and it's just like a branded booth. It's like, why would I come here? Why would I stop at this booth? There's like nothing. Like even if you don't even have to hanging up a satellite, like that's a bold thing. But having some sort of like offer, right? Like give me some sort of like offer, something I can get involved with that I would actually want to do.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to ask about your product.
Right, despite your booth looking really nice and being right there, and you probably have been poured like hundreds of thousands into us. We've all done. Yeah, right. I like what you said too. It doesn't have to be this like satellite or like covetable thing that you want to consume, but maybe value. Like, is it an offer that they could that's very practical and they could immediately take back to their team? Like another example was we offered to show them a scan from the satellites of over their headquarters or over a certain spot of their operations that they often face disruption in. Right. So I think each org could find their own like aha moment, but something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool example. I've actually just remembered as well what I was gonna ask you earlier. You mentioned about the kind of lead magnet downloads, white papers, whatever people want to call them, right? How are you guys thinking about gated content at the moment?
Yeah, we gate, I'd say only when we must. We have a lot of proprietary information given the nature of our tech. And so
okay.
on the space side, for example, we've put out a big technical brochure, and in that we gate. But the function is only, I'd say from a privacy standpoint, for us, we've very much, in fact, I can't even think of the last time that we've intentionally gated a traditional lead magnet, like a data report, for example. Instead, we really believe in giving it up front. And we just did do this with a data report, by the way. And then it's similar to the event, as we just talked about, giving them the opportunity to convert, to ask to talk to us if they want to. But I feel even just as a consumer of content, like maybe this is critical because I'm a marketer, but like I kind of have a bad taste in my mouth if I have to give something up to get something that I don't even know yet is good and valuable. And so we want to show them the value first. And then oftentimes if they reach out, what we try to do is have something else waiting for them that's similar. So like the data report that I mentioned, we'll create like a custom version for them, just for those people who then like raise their hands. So we're only investing with the people who have reached out, but not because they just want the content and fill out the form, but because there's a deeper signal, and then we'll customize.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And actually, I think, it's such a good point. And I think like when because this is one of the things I've always I've really changed my mind on this. I used to be, a big proponent of like gated content, but now it's just like, and you see it, you're absolutely right. Like you just see this so often where people would just use whatever spam Gmail address they can to sign up for something. And then, if anything, it can just kind of tarnish that relationship. If they then download something and they're like, oh, I've seen this before, and you've then broken all of that trust. Whereas if you can just focus on just delivering like amazing value, not asking for anything in return, it just elevates your status in that prospect side. So whether they end up speaking to you guys or coming through as a lead a year from now, a month from now, 2 years from now, who knows? But it's kind of like just building those little bits of trust along the way, right?
Totally. And I guess I keep wanting to give this caveat. Maybe this is a given, but again, this is all perhaps specific to us. Like we're a really unique organization, and I could see maybe at scale for if you're targeting SMB, since we're targeting enterprise, that maybe that would make sense to have something gated, because in the nurture, once you do that at scale, you'll also offer them value. And so in fact, they are raising their hand for more value down the road. But just to be clear, like it's probably time and place. This is all directed, I'd say, just at us right now.
That's true. And I like that you've said that, because, I guess you guys have to say that as a disclaimer, but I will say, because we've got clients on the, who are targeting smaller businesses, SMBs. I think even there, I think the same thing applies, because what is starting to happen is it's kind of like, I think skepticism is just rising and rising. Right. So even if you are selling something much lower value to smaller businesses, maybe the buying cycle is much shorter. The same thing still applies. People have still been burned. People are still feeling that fatigue of like, oh God, here we go again. Another like attempt to get my email address. So it is just getting harder and harder. Like I've seen this, you can get some really compelling lead magnets, but it's getting harder to convert them because people's trust is, just declining. So I think it is important for any business really to think about, and I'm not saying you need to ungate everything, but it is worth just thinking about, should we really be gating this, or does it make more sense for us to just at this stage just be building trust, with our potential customers?
100%.
So Kelly, how do you guys what are some of the kind of big initiatives that you're focusing on for the year ahead, for 2020, for the rest of 2025?
Yeah, so from a company perspective, first off, we are continuing to launch satellites. In fact, we just announced this morning our latest sat that launched yesterday, our latest one. So that's really exciting. Thank you. And as a marketing team, I would say that our biggest focus relates to that, in the sense that the satellites are getting us proprietary data. And just to kind of double down on why that's so important, most other weather companies, if not all of them, are all using the same data, using repackaged governmental data or from an international agency, whatever it might be. And so that's really core to our technology, but it's also becoming really core to our marketing strategy. And so as we get more of this data from space and this really valuable gold mine basically in our product, we're starting to be able to use it in our marketing outbound, for example. So I'll give you an anecdote right now. In the insurance space, that's somewhere where we really know it's a good fit for us and we're seeing traction. We know that if there's a hailstorm, if insurers were to tell their policyholders, hey, hail is coming in 30 minutes, 85% of them actually will go move their car inside. And thus for the insurer, as you can imagine, huge savings in terms of claims avoided. So we know that this is a really strong use case for our platform. So what we've found is, and we're building right now, is that we can actually trigger automated outbound, or we're building something to be able to do this based on incoming hail, and say to these insurers, hey, just so you know, a hailstorm is coming and you could alert your policyholders. We know that if you did, from research that we did, most of them, large majority, will actually go move their car and you could avoid claims. And so we're making that proprietary data not only like the key thing, of course, in our technology and product, but like kind of our secret sauce on the marketing side too. And we're seeing really good responses to it. And it's a value add for the people receiving the emails. 100%. Like it's not just promotional. It goes back into everything that we're talking about.
Yeah. And
so I think that's one, is just still leaning into data as our moat above all else. And then it also, I guess, ties in and worth mentioning, like AI. So we've really proactively embraced AI, both from the marketing team side and the organizational side. And how could we not, given the size of our team? And so we are using AI in every function you can imagine in the marketing ecosystem. And the outbound engine that I just mentioned is, like all connected via AI. And it's kind of like the culmination of like all of these different tools we've been using, which is cool to see. But yeah, I could talk AI forever. Just all to say, I guess, data, and then certainly continuing to explore AI and how it can make us go faster and bigger.
We'll come back to the AI piece for sure.
Yeah.
But that proprietary data thing, I think, is a really, it's such a, because, and again, there's always context here, but I think for most B2B organizations, you are always going to have some form of proprietary data. I mean, for us, for example, our proprietary data might just be experience working with different clients. And I think sometimes, like, what you want to try and look for, as you guys are doing there, is you're looking for those opportunities that position you as thought leaders, right, to these insurance companies. And I think this is the mistake that's easy to make for a lot of businesses is they take the learnings that everybody already knows. So it doesn't really position them as a thought leader. What I've been trying to do more of recently is finding these like weird exceptions to the rule where we've actually found something that goes against conventional marketing advice, and showing those exceptions, saying, hey, everyone's talking about this, but that doesn't always apply. Here's an example kind of thing, right? So it's like for anyone watching this or listening to this right now, I think if you just think about kind of how these, like whatever industry you're in, what are some of those things that you're seeing day to day, right? Where it's kind of like, okay, this isn't quite the conventional, the norm that's, talked about out there. And that could then be a really powerful, to your point, Kelly, just like a value add, right? For prospects, for potential customers. So yeah, I think that's a really, really cool point. But just to circle back now to the AI thing, because obviously is, it's always going to be a big thing on people's minds. What are some of the ways that you guys are using AI? Other than like what you mentioned about the kind of, the integrations there with proprietary data and things, how else are you using AI in the team to kind of streamline and make you guys more efficient at what you do with being a small team?
Yeah, so I'd say, just to give you some history, back when GPT really started coming majorly onto the scene, which, what are we talking now? A year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. And our CMO and I took a step back, one of those moments of like really auditing ourselves, and said, this feels like the time that we can't just passively think about this thing. We need to proactively embrace it. It's almost like do it or die. Like we're such a small team, like this is going to be the thing. And so we actually hired an AI first marketer. Her name is Ruth Favela. Go connect with her. She's amazing. Still on our team. Her role is focused around being a general marketer, as you'd expect. I mean, we're a team of 4. She's absolutely wearing many hats. But a core part of her role is also almost AI-ification, as we've called it, and making sure that we're staying up on the ecosystem. I'm sure everyone listening can appreciate the feeling of not paying attention to AI for like a few weeks or a month and coming back and thinking, oh my gosh, like so much has changed. OpenAI came out with this new model. Like, what is this? There's a whole new like category of AI tools. And so her role is to keep us up to date so that we know about the latest and greatest. And also organizationally, she's leading an org-wide effort to bring other teams onto AI now. And so that's been really core for us, is to have her and to have the buy-in from top down to say AI is a core part of our mission. It's not just something we're proactively or passively thinking about. And so with that, I mean, we right now have a goal to make sure we are automating 70% of marketing tasks, not tasks, even just responsibilities, I'd say, with AI, not fully, but like to some extent, making sure that we are using AI, which actually is pretty doable, given that you can have kind of like a powerhouse of an LLM do a lot of stuff. But we are starting with AI, I would say, in the majority of things. Certainly on the video side, like the documentary, even these really big creative activations that need a human to ideate, absolutely. But we're using it, for example, to go through the transcripts, like hours and hours of footage, and pull out the best things. So and that's just one example. Broadly, I would say it is handling the day-to-day rote tasks for us and just getting our typical marketing machine rolling constantly so that we can spend more time thinking of the big strategic ideas, the documentaries of the world, the space satellite hanging over the booth. But it's the engine below it all, just day-to-day churning.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So you're kind of using it more, so like you say, you guys are kind of free to focus on like the bigger picture, and you've just got that working behind the scenes to kind of make you more efficient, basically.
Exactly.
I think it's really interesting actually that you said you've kind of hired, and I think it's a smart move, you know, it's a bold move to make, and it kind of shows then your belief. And I guess this kind of comes back to, I guess, a question again of like your ethos, your kind of marketing ethos, if we want to call it that again, right? But because you mentioned earlier as well about you guys use a lot of kind of outsource and freelance talent as well, and you know, you're like videographer, for example. How do you, and you know, again, I suppose this comes down to ethos, but how do you think through and decide like who do we need to have in-house versus like what can we outsource?
It's a great question. I was just thinking about this before we got on, actually, because we're doing a video project, and I would say, first off, it's always changing because of AI. Like we now are using some tools that are allowing us to do some video internally that we previously would have had to outsource. So that's first off, is like what core competencies we own are fluid often because of like tools coming out.
That's a good point.
But I would say, first off, it's about getting the right people in the door who can buy into the ethos we've talked about. And I'd say characteristics that I've seen enable that would be like curiosity, for example, and an eagerness to learn, and not be too stuck in traditional ways, because it's hard. Like we want to promote ourselves. Like if you're a marketer, the event I just described might sound terrible and like triggering, and like what if they don't ask for a demo at the end? And so it's you know, like that was a real risk. What if we just like didn't like imprint any of our brand on them at all? So it's people who are yeah, I guess like excited about the future of marketing. It maybe sounds so generic, but they're hungry and they're curious and they want to build something different and new. And as long as there's that core characteristic there, I think we've been able to put people in different core competencies as they've told us they're interested. And like, you can learn those things, but you can't learn how to be curious and want to do something new and like buck the B2B trends.
100%.
Yeah. And so core competencies, like for example, like we will always own the website internally for ourselves. We've just learned over the years it's best for us to own our own destiny there. But anything we
100%
anything we can outsource, like we do, unless someone like internally says, you know what, I actually really love email marketing. Like I'd love to own that. And we say like, okay, great, let's figure it out. And then we'll outsource, you know, X, Y, or Z. There are certain things like the website are based on people's interests, but if we can outsource it, we kind of do.
Quick question on that, actually, because I think that's a really interesting one. I totally agree with you guys owning the website. I think for business, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are certain sizes of businesses where maybe it does make sense, but yeah. I just think, you know, the ability to be able to move, like your website is, you know, it still is, that's where prospects are landing on, right?
Exactly.
And if you have received insights or intel that you need to change your positioning or messaging, if you've got to flip in email an agency and then wait however long for them to make changes or whatever, it's like you can't afford to do that. So it's just like it's to me it just seems like such a crazy thing. Like why is that? Why you guys did that? Is it about speed more than anything?
Yeah, I'd say speed, definitely. Exactly as you said. Oh my goodness, our market is changing so quickly. We suddenly really cannot have this on the website. Like if our hands are tied, it can't happen. That's one thing. I'd say also, how do I say, like time it takes to get someone to understand the brand. And it's not it's not an agency's fault, but you know, as you get to know a company's value in the mission, and especially for us where we're working across so many different industries, and within those industries there's different personas and the tech is changing so much, we are picking up on nuances that it's sometimes just difficult to even communicate externally, and it has to be reflected on the website. And so we might say, here's this text, you know, put it like this, but we might understand that actually we meant connect it visually in this way. And by the way, we accidentally slipped this word in, but like, absolutely, you should know that not to put that with our brand. Like, it's just a little bit too complex for us. And it's not an external person's fault, but there's just a lot of nuance and brand equity at stake that we need to own.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Cool. All right. So let's talk, Kelly, about tomorrow, as in where do you think we're heading for the kind of future of marketing? With everything we've talked about so far, like some of the things you guys are working on for 2025, like what do you think is going to be? I mean, I know it's one of those things, right, where the rate at which kind of technology and AI is progressing, it's super difficult to say what's going to look like in the next 6 months as opposed to the next, like, you know, year.
Yeah.
What do you think are going to be some fundamental changes that are happening over the coming years?
Yeah, I'd say, not to repeat myself too much in this like middle ground concept, but I feel like I already am seeing marketing teams function much more as almost media teams versus just brand ambassadors and promoting, you know, their certain piece of content for their organization. An example I think is, I was just reading something about Home Depot. They're opening, and that's B2C obviously, but they're opening like a Home Depot studio, and their marketing team is bringing people in just to almost basically shoot like little shows. Yeah. Check me on this. I'm pretty sure it was Home Depot. And I think that goes along with everything we talked about here today, that we're going to make, we're no longer just competing with each other as marketers. Like we are officially competing with Netflix and YouTube and other media companies, like for people's 100%. Attention, because AI sounds
crazy, but it's true.
Right. I know, right? Like, I don't even know if you asked me that 6 months ago if I'd agree with that, but now I really fully believe that. Like, AI is getting so good at allowing us to create pretty good content that the bar for quality content is much higher, I guess is what I'm seeing. And so I think we are competing with the Netflixes of the world, and we need to make content that people actually want to consume, to go back to what we're talking about, or consume or participate in if it's on the event side. So that's one thing I'd say, functioning more as almost media organizations. And then going back to the data side, like really from a positioning standpoint, finding more clearly and developing your moat, and marketing really having a more defined and critical seat at the table and doing that at the organizational level. Like given what's happening in AI, like software, for example, is kind of becoming commoditized. Like you can, using Replit, like create some pretty good apps right now. Even on the modeling side for us on the weather piece, you can use AI to create in your basement a pretty good model. And so all of this is becoming commoditized, and it goes back to the data piece, like at least for us, and I think that's applicable to most organizations. Like the data, whatever it is for you, is your biggest asset, and how you position that is really important. And obviously marketing is part of the positioning there. So I think defining and building your moat, whatever that is, with marketing at the helm is going to be really, really critical.
Yeah. I think it's I love what you said there about kind of almost competing with Netflix and Hulu and whoever else, because it's so true. And it's kind of like, what you have to remember is it's the bar and the expectations that people have, even just on an unconscious level. The standards of content are just rising, right? And it's just there is just a much higher kind of there's all this stuff of like people have the attention span of a goldfish. I don't even think it's not about we're all just kind of ADHD and we've got 3-second attention spans. That's not what it's about. It's just that it takes more. Like we will sit down and watch, as you've proven with your documentary, we will sit down and watch a 30-minute video if it's good.
Yeah.
That's the variable. It's not that you need to have a 5-second TikTok reel or anything like that. It's just, can we make content that is so good people actually want to spend 30 minutes watching it, right? And to be fair, what brand wouldn't want someone to watch a 30-minute video versus a 5-minute video? If we can get someone to spend 30 minutes with us and get more of that mind share, great.
Exactly. I like what you said there about attention span. It's so true. Like it's perhaps we're all just becoming, our tastes are more discerned. Like we know, we all just watched White Lotus. Amazing. Loved it. Season 3.
I've seen that.
But yeah, like we know what we like more. There's more content out there that's really good. Like we're pickier, as we should be.
So true. So true. Yeah. And what, just on that note of like media as well, because I know one of the other things that we've talked about before, something that you guys are quite big on, is kind of almost pushing like the leadership team and the founder of the business as well, right? Through like LinkedIn and stuff like that. Like how are you guys kind of seeing that, like that kind of play in terms of getting more of the leadership team out there and just their own personal brands? Is that something you guys kind of think about a lot internally?
Definitely. Especially right now, you can go on LinkedIn and you can go look at our CEO, Shimon Elkabetz is his name, and we're really working with him to push our narrative out that way, not to overcome the company narrative, because I think that is important. That I've like been challenged with in the past is it's a balance. It's not saying exactly what you want the company to say from the founder, but it's complementing it. And we're really using him to tell a few different stories specific to who we think his audience is. And it's knowing specifically, I think, who each, in our case, founder's audience is. Like, for him, we have a few pillars. For another one of our founders, we know that they're speaking more to the technical side. And so it is still like the fundamental understanding the audience and the themes. But overall, yes, we're finding that people are far more engaged. They have this, new taste for quality content, as we're talking about, with an actual human, authentic voice versus corporate speak. And they'd rather hear a story coming from a person versus jargon, certainly coming from a corporate account. And good timing, actually. I'll send the link to you after time, but we announced the space launch today, as I mentioned. The post that we had from our founder today, perfect example of the shift here. He was, of course, at the launch, and he got to bring his son, which was an amazing moment. And the post that we had for him was far more about the story of experiencing this with our team and with his son versus we did this and this is our technology and I just checked before this and we're getting far more engagement like 3 hours in than I know for a fact than we have in the past when we just do the typical post. And so very, very timely question. We're very focused on it. Yes.
It's really, I mean, this is a whole, other kind of rabbit hole in itself, really.
Yeah.
Like it is a tricky one. It is a balance because I think that there's a lot of people, especially now, kind of like, Elon Musk as an example, right, with Tesla. There's a lot of people who I think are very scared of the idea because naturally, it's kind of like there's so many personal biases and political standpoints, and it does get a little bit kind of scary when you think, oh God, like what could happen, what could go wrong here. But I think there is a balancing act, and at the end of the day, like the most fundamental thing to remember is exactly like you said, like we are all human, and I know it's really cliche and overused, but like humans do buy from humans. Like there's a reason that posts from a personal profile will always outperform that of a company profile because people don't want to engage with a company. They want to buy from people. They want to engage with other people. And to your point, like stories, and as of right now, at least, this is the only thing that kind of AI really can't kind of replicate because it doesn't have our personal stories and anecdotes and things like that. And that is ultimately how we connect.
Exactly.
So I think, it's a really good point, and I think I like that you guys are working on it because it can be scary, like, and I understand why it's scary, but I think it's one of those things that kind of needs to be done. And this whole topic of where marketing is going, that's one of the fundamental beliefs that I have is just that piece of that I think is only going to get amplified further. The need for there to be more personal branding, leadership branding.
Completely agree. Yeah. And there's a place, as you like alluded to, I think for the company voice there as well. It's just distinctly different. They need to be complementary. And on the like point of the risk and the fear of it, I guess just like kind of validate that for anyone else feeling that like it's a crazy world right now. Like we spend more time on his posts, for example, like we pour over every word and really are very intentional. Could this get taken this way? Could this be interpreted? What if we're not thinking about something? So just to kind of validate that, like we spend a lot of time, and we're very careful. We've drafted things that we ended up not posting, and so just to say, like, if you're feeling like that, you're not alone. But it can still be done. It just takes time, and like that's where, for example, that's a place we choose to invest our time. Like a human needs to guess about like unintentional interpretations there versus like writing a company post or something.
And it's good, and I love that, and I think I'm just good that you said that because I think you're right to be kind of thoughtful about those things. But like you say, there are some things, there are some challenges that are worth undergoing, right, and worth putting your time and effort into, and I think this is one of those things. One of the other things that I wanted to mention, this kind of ties into what you guys do, I guess, really, Kelly, as well, is like I feel like as time goes on, personalization in advertising is going to become more and more important. It already is even now. But something that I think, and when I say personalization, not just personalization, but also signal-based advertising is going to be super important. And actually, I know we've kind of, I don't actually know much about this myself, but obviously as part of your platform, you actually have a kind of marketing weather intelligence solution, right? Right. And it's funny because I was actually speaking to a hospitality group a couple of days ago now who have got like a whole range of diners all across the US. And they've got like outdoor ones and indoor venues, and they were saying weather has like a massive impact on the venues that get booked out, and they're running these huge ad campaigns. And I said to them, you should check out tomorrow, like we need to get some, because and they hadn't actually heard of it either. And I do think though that is a really good example of where like marketing is getting more and more expensive.
Exactly.
So the more we can use that data, that signal data, is so important. Whether that be weather events or even just buyer intent data or any other kind of data signals that we can get. It's so critical to making sure that you kind of get the right message to the right people at the right time. That's
exactly. Like, couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. And I'll give you an example because I think it's just fun to think about. We work with a major fast food chain, just started doing a POC with them for, I think, like 30 of their restaurants, using our weather data. And what they do is send out text alerts to customers automatically with like weather sensitive or weather like influenced incentives. So for example, it's cold out, come in and get soup and like the hot sandwich versus they have like a sunny day special or something. It's 10% off if you come. And they saw like over a 500% increase in foot traffic during those times because of them. And for us, like, that's obviously cool. that's weather, but it's a signal. It could be any signal based campaign there. I love what you said. I totally agree. And I think it's fun. Like, I like thinking of what other data could we put in and like, oh, that would be so cool. And now with AI, we could build that. And what if it could be automated? The possibilities are endless. Weather is just one input. I'd argue it's a very powerful one. So we should talk more if this is resonating for anyone. But there's so many inputs. You can chain them together in Clay now for Outbound. It's a whole new world.
It's so cool, and it is so it's so underutilized right now. Like I think there are, like you say, there are so many different types of signals that we can be using in marketing.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a super important point.
Yeah,
Kelly, this has been awesome. So thank you so much for coming on. Anything else that we kind of didn't touch on that you think would be kind of good to mention here that you think would help anyone listening?
I think we touched on most of what I was thinking of mentioning anyway, so we're on the same page. But yeah, please feel free to reach out. You can hopefully tell I love talking about this.
We'll drop the links in the show notes and in the description and stuff below anyway. So if you want to check out tomorrow, there'll be the links in the description.
Thanks, Tom. This was a blast.